Nani kanunua gari na wewe kanunua, mashindani ni ya nini? Shughulika na yako, baraka tofauti haziwezi kufanana. Sisi sote tofauti, Muumba katuumba, hatuwezi kufanana. Kusema watasema, mwisho watachoka, misemo haiui, ni baraka. Kusema watasema, mwisho watachoka, watalala, misemo haiui, ni baraka. Watasema, mwisho watachoka, misemo haiui, ni baraka. Kusema watasema, mwisho watachoka, misemo haiui, ni baraka. Kusema watasema, mwisho watachoka, misemo haiui, ni baraka.
Kajan asibalite sira janya anabadondola ulumi filoye ne masama nena sama londo Yiri turubi, londo yiri sumaba. Koloni sembiche, lonja mino bunye. Konetara no feronye, finini minye neosa. Konetara damanala, sanungule minye neosa. Netara fandala nye warije minye neosa. Oye sirata ye. Oye neka sirata ye. Oye sirani yoro ye.
Mesdames et messieurs, nous sommes...
Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start. Please be seated. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin. Please be seated. Please also note that we have simultaneous interpretation in French and English. Headphones are available on the tables, so do not hesitate to use them. Thank you. Okay. Excellences, Madame la Directrice Générale de l'UNESCO,
Madam Director General of UNESCO, Your Excellency,
Monsieur le Ministre de la Culture et des Arts,
Mr. Minister of Culture and Arts of the Republic of Gabon, Your Excellency, Excellencies, dear panelists, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Thank you for showing up in numbers for this unprecedented event here in UNESCO, focusing on the fashion industry. We have just closed the Haute Couture Week in Paris. The event follows the launch of the report published by UNESCO on the fashion sector in Africa in Lagos with the Director General and with Omeyemi Akerele. This event today is structured in two parts. First, we will have a session with the fashion designers and entrepreneurs of the fashion industry from Africa. Then we will have a session with the strategic institutions to reflect on collaborations and partnerships in order to support this promising sector. Lastly, we will have a short Q&A in order to pick up on elements that were said by panelists. Now, in this beautiful stage that was made by the 193 Gallery with the work of the artist Thandiwe Mouria, I have the honor to give the floor to Madam Director General of UNESCO.
Bonjour à tous, bienvenue.
Welcome, everyone. I also wanted to pay tribute to this wonderful work that's here on stage in this room, the Room 1 here in UNESCO. For those of you who don't know the organization that well, we are an intergovernmental organization. We are part of the United Nations family with 194 member states. We work on culture, science, and education. But today we are focusing on fashion. Why, you may ask? Well, fashion has within it freedom, the freedom to create, the freedom to exist, but also to imagine. Fashion also has within it innovation, whether it be about how you manufacture or distribute fashion. Fashion is also about heritage, and this reminds me of the beautiful traditional cloth and fabrics in Africa, some of which are on the intangible list of UNESCO. Fashion is also about employment and visibility, and it is a way to present yourself to the world and to say to the world who you are, where you are from, and what you imagine for your own future. UNESCO, in the framework of its Priority Africa, has decided to support in its own way the rise and the excitement that's within the fashion industry in Africa. And we can see it with different designers coming from Africa or of African descent. They draw inspiration from their roots in order to express themselves on this innovative market. Africa is an inspiration to the world in terms of fashion. The talents that make up the fashion industry are entrepreneurs, but also fashion designers. And the work that has to be done now is to consolidate the industry. And this is done through, for example, the Haute Couture Week that just closed yesterday. And this comes with its own issues. These issues, of course, pertain to the fashion industry, but also the banking industry, public policies, an array of ecosystems. And we must consolidate these ecosystems in order to support the industry. these issues of investments, of sustainability, of the measures that have to be taken in order to support Africa's fashion industry are the issues that we have wanted to put together as a form of advocacy to support this industry that is so important in terms of a symbol and in terms of economy. We had also worked on the film industry in Africa. We had produced a report, which then led to an event and partnerships, namely with Netflix. And I'd like to wish the same kind of success for this report. You will see there will be a discussion with a very high-level panel. I thank the panelists for being here today. We are going to talk about these future partnerships to come for this movement. I wish you a beautiful discussion, and let's make some room for fashion and for Africa.
Merci, Madame la...
Thank you, Madam Director General. We have now officially opened this event, and before I welcome the panelists, I'd like us now to look at a short video presenting the recommendations and conclusions of the report made by UNESCO on the fashion industry in Africa.
The African fashion sector is brimming with opportunities. Driven by its young, digital-savvy population, the continent is never short of imagination. Designers draw inspiration from their heritage and skillfully transform it, weaving their unique visions of Africa. UNESCO's report, The African Fashion Sector: Trends, Challenges, and Opportunities for Growth, reveals a dynamic fashion powerhouse on the rise. In 2020, Sub-Saharan Africa accounted for 7.3% of the global market. Still, Africa's fashion industry is not without hindrance, and missed opportunities have cost the continent, evidenced by its $7.6 billion trade deficit in clothing and footwear. The UNESCO study has identified the existing gaps and how to overcome them. First, the fashion sector needs to be integrated into national development plans. Currently, the sector lacks comprehensive policies to guide its growth. It is crucial that ministries responsible for the value chain, from trade, labor to culture, work together on a shared strategy for growth. Second, we need to build an attractive business environment for investors and startups. Almost 60% of the UNESCO study participants listed the lack of investments as a primary constraint to the national industry development. Structured public and private investments must be accompanied by infrastructure development across the value chain. Third, decent working conditions and fair remuneration must be ensured. This includes the enforcement of intellectual property rights so the creators can be recognized and compensated for their work. Last but not least, we need to provide more formal education opportunities in fashion for the continent's young and entrepreneurial population. Today, few trainings on offer meet the needs of emerging designers and aspiring professionals. With strategic policies and collective efforts, African fashion can drive economic prosperity, empower women and youth, and emerge as the leader in sustainable fashion. The time for Made in Africa is upon us.
Merci, je pense que ça mérite un applaudissement.
Thank you. I think this deserves a round of applause. Thank you. This video is a perfect introduction to what we are going to be talking about this afternoon. UNESCO has decided to invite designers and entrepreneurs from Africa to come up on stage and discuss the findings of the report. Let us now welcome our first panelists, Omoyemi Akerele, who is the director of the Lagos Fashion Week. Omoyemi. Alfadi, He's a fashion designer and also a UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador for African Innovation and Creation. Iman Aissi, she is an haute couture fashion designer. Aissa Dion, fabric and cloth creator. Laurine Kwasi-Olson, she's the founder and the general director of Birimian. And Lulu Chabel, founder and head of creativity champion group Lulubel.
Excuse me, Lulu Chabel.
Apologies, Lulu Chabel.
We are very pleased to have all of you with us today, and I'm very honored to moderate this panel. Alors, le rapport identifie.
The UNESCO report identifies opportunities for growth, but also challenges, and we'd like to talk about these challenges with you. I'd like to start with you, Alfadi. You are a great figure of fashion. Does the fashion industry contribute to sustainable development in Africa through creating jobs and income?
Magnifique. Merci beaucoup, Toussaint.
Thank you very much, Toussaint. I'd like to thank UNESCO for inviting me, and I'd like to congratulate Audrey Azoulay. I'd like to commend you for this great struggle, because this is truly giving an opportunity to fight against poverty, because fashion can create jobs and opportunities. I am truly happy to be a witness of this energy here, and I'd like to say one thing about the FIMA, the first fashion festival. Now, this was before the Lagos Fashion Week and before everything else. And I think it's very important for all the different linguistic worlds in Africa to meet on that. And I think that the struggle we are leading is very important. And we worked on intellectual property. We worked on the image of African fashion. We worked on funding. We have just with the city of Rabat, which was the cultural capital of the continent, we worked with His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, and we will get back to that. We will get back to that. But the report really focuses on how this industry creates jobs and incomes, empowers women, but it goes beyond that, of course, because it also contributes to peace. And this is also something that you're working on. Absolutely, and it really is wonderful. And this is my struggle. I was named a Goodwill Ambassador 10 years ago because in 2018, we used fashion to end the conflict in North Niger. And the rebellion was ended in that way, jobs were created, and the image of the country just changed entirely. That made Niger what it is today. And since 2 years now, and I'd like to thank Madame Azoulay, because this was when I was a Goodwill Ambassador for Peace, and now I have a different role. I'm a Goodwill Ambassador for Innovation and Arts. I truly believe that fashion must be recognized as an industry in of itself, and we must find ways to support the industry, because there is a lack of funding. Exactly. 31 billion and $15.5 billion in exports, and that many jobs that are created through fashion in Africa today, but we will get back to that in a few minutes.
We had the great honor of launching UNESCO's report during the Lagos Fashion Week. And this report emphasizes the need to create an enabling and attractive business environment for creators and investors in the fashion sector. Lagos Fashion Week is an incredible platform for showcasing the work of African fashion designers at international level. Why are such platforms so important, Omoyemi?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Toussaint, and thank you so much, UNESCO, for the platform for all of us to be able to sit down and talk. I think the straightforward answer would be to go on and talk about either the impact that we've made or the work that we've done using Lagos Fashion Week in the last for over a decade. But I think what I really want to say today is I'm really tired of talking.
Time is to act.
I'm really tired of talking. I don't want to be back here in another room 5 years from now, and we're talking about the same thing, romanticizing about African fashion or celebrating it. You know, it's not an idol to be worshipped. Neither is it, you know, a toy for us to hug and celebrate every now and then when we feel like it. I think, you know, Al-Fadi has gone on to tell us about, for example, how fashion was used as a tool, you know, during the time of war. So for me, I think it goes really deeper than that, and that's why I'm happy about the UNESCO report. It's already listed out the challenges. It's told us about the opportunities. It's even helped us to create a pathway for the future. So for me, instead of reading out to you all the things we do or we've done at Lagos Fashion Week, I hope everyone sitting in here realizes that, you know, we're all stakeholders. You know, we're all a part of this shared future, and this shared future can only, take us beyond many more rooms like this if we all start to act now, you know, invest in where we need to invest, speaking to our government to take, you know, to take on the responsibility to do what they need to do so that we can ride on the back of huge platforms and institutions like UNESCO to be able to achieve our goals so that my children are sitting in the room today. I don't want to come here with my grandchildren, possibly, and we're still romanticizing about Africa fashion. Why should you support us? Why you should invest? Why it's important? You know, I think we all just know what to do, so why don't we do it? So I think that's why I'm here today. Thank you so much, Toussaint, and I look forward to that happening.
Time has got to act. Thank you very much, Omoyemi, for your very interesting insight.
Now, I'd like to turn to you, Iman Ayisi. We're pleased to meet you again ever since the launch of the report in Lagos, and you honored us with your presence. You're an international fashion designer. You're internationally recognized, and you even held a fashion show last Monday during the Haute Couture Week in Paris. Could you please tell us how you reached that high level of excellence, and what is your take on the contribution of African creativity to the fashion sector at the international level? Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank the Director General of UNESCO, Mrs. Azoulay, and her whole team. This is also one of the major landmarks in history. I'd like to pick up on what was said earlier on. We need to actually mention the major dates in history. We have to write our history. There were many things which were done, but sometimes we tend to forget about them. We need to mention them. This is how we're also going to educate those who will follow us. History is dear to me. I want things to be given their proper place. We have Al-Fadi. We also have our Malian brother, Chris Seydou, and among others. I think that they all came before us, and we need to mention them because some are arriving now, and you don't just show up and become Saint Laurent and Dior overnight. It takes time. It's a long path. I was a model. I was a dancer, and I was a model for Saint Laurent, Dior, but I'm a self-taught in fashion. And at one point in time, I wanted to be really at the heart of action. I was also an extra in the film industry, and I also was a cleaning person. And but ever since 1993, I took part in the different collections. So you can see that it requires perseverance. And I was also a model who was not on the catwalks. I was in the workshops. I met Mr. Saint Laurent. I worked for Cardin, Givenchy, and we could speak. We were able to say, well, it's not really fitting properly. We were called hangers, but things have changed today. So what is your perception of African designers at the international level? I think that things have changed. We're no longer wondering where Black people are. Well, do we do what it takes? Do we buy what African designers produce? Do we think about craftsmen and women when we speak about fashion? Is it only the printed fabric? Well, people are saying that I criticize a lot, but it's a matter of identity and pride. To conclude, I think it's important to say that crafts people need to be put at the forefront. We do have our own textile, traditional textile, and sometimes we forget about it. We will touch on that with Isa Dion. Now, your approach consists in highlighting African fabric. So we will go back to that later on.
To move on to you, Lulu Chabel. You are the founder and CEO of Creativity Champion, an advisory firm that represents and manages African fashion brands. Given your experience and commitment to young creators, how can we better support entrepreneurship in the fashion sector across the continent?
Thank you, Toussaint. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, to be reconvened again by UNESCO after the launch in Lagos. That was in November, and it's good to see so many people here, although the light can't see really the faces, but I know a few people in the room. I think, as Omoyemi said, we are tired of talking, right? And I think it's time that we all galvanize ourselves to get to a point where we can actually give each other action points as to what to do. Based on the work that we do, we work with around 70 designers right now. We're in the process of finding out how we can bring this group of 70 designers, 80 very soon, into a space where we can create a shared services platform for them to be able to now have access, better access and, better preferential rates to things like marketing, production, supply chain, all of those things, right? Because an investor will not invest in one designer. They want to make it a collective, so then it's better, it's easy for them, it's more efficient for them. They can actually even hedge the risk when it's a collective versus this one person, right? Even in terms of marketing, we know how expensive advertising is. We have hardly ever seen an African brand that is actively advertising anywhere outside of even their own countries. So these are the actual things that designers need. But then I think more importantly, we also need to look at a governance structure for the continent. We talk of made in Africa as if it's one country. It's 55 countries, right? And all these countries have, in as much as they have a lot of similarities, they have very specific differences and nuances in culture that beg for, specific actions for them to be able to profit and to explore the potential. And I remember when we had the first convening, I think that was done with Tos in Anima Shaun, I think she's somewhere in the room. We had made a call to action to UNESCO to see how they can facilitate a working group that can start to look at how we can create this apex body that can be attached, for example, to the AU, that can begin to look at how we can define governance, policy-making strategy, and then it becomes a regulatory body that can go out and champion for the sector. You know, I think if we don't start with the governance and the leadership around this sector, all the things we're doing, we end up working silos, and it's not enough to actually create the critical mass and the action that we need. So, if anything, you know, let's get the structures going.
Thank you very much for your insights. Indeed, this will be the subject of the second panel, and in order to see how we can act now instead of speaking. Yeah, you wanted to say something?
Yes, exactly, because I know, for example, you have the CFDA, you have the Moda Italiana, you have the, Fédération de la Haute Couture, you have, in British Fashion Council, they exist within the countries. And these are the same people we can actually call into the room and ask for their advice and guidance on how we can create such structures for ourselves, within our own context, of course.
They are in the room, and we'll talk after.
Super.
So this is a good transition for me pour aborder la question de financement.
To move on to the funding issue with Mrs. Lorraine. Well, the Federation of African Couture was established in 1994. It was set up in Ghana when Chris Seidu died. So we cannot forget this federation within which we are thriving. The federation. Yes, I've taken note of this, and I've also taken note of what Iman said on the historical background. They do exist. Of course, it's impossible to build a future when you don't know where you come from and what has been done before. And the report does cover that, even if it's briefly. Maybe we should have stressed that more. Now, funding, you are a veteran, and you have Biriaman Ventures, and you propose long-term investments, and you defend luxury brands and top-level brands of the African heritage. Could you please tell us about your experience about access to funding in the fashion sector in Africa? Thank you. Thank you for having invited us, and thank you for having provided this platform for discussion. Biriaman is devoted to supporting the development of the fashion sector, and I come from the finance world, capital investment world, and I had a passion for fashion, and I decided to set up a structure for that purpose. Now, I'm humble because it's very difficult to bring investors to invest in fashion. Why? Because the brands are not strong enough. There are issues related to infrastructure, market access, and the risk is that this dynamic creativity cannot be turned into economic benefits. Now, when you speak about capital investment, which is difficult to achieve, we have decided to turn things around. We decided to look at mechanism to support creation based on other types of funding. We were able to support 25 brands today, and we're trying to deploy it in other countries. What is important is to say that this is a pioneer approach. 54 countries will not have the same type of funding. We need Pan-African federations. We need to take into account local specificities. And we Africans, we have to realize that as in all countries, all other countries, funding fashion is very difficult, and all designers have to be aware of the fact that it's a business. It's an activity that should generate turnover and growth. And if they accept the rules of the game, designers and funders, we can have a long-term funding for the economy and for the private sector. Because as in all sectors, creation has to support growth and generation of GDP. I come from Côte d'Ivoire, and as a child, I always heard that my country was successful thanks to agriculture. And it is true. For maybe 40, 60 years, that was true. But today, I am sure that the success of our countries will be based on culture. So we need to find financing modes to support culture. Thank you for this interesting comment, because we always touch on the issue of funding. It's related also to material. I said, John, you're based in Senegal, and you have devoted your activities for years now to the development of know-how in Africa, in the West Africa, in the area of art and fabric. And your workshop is a reference in this area. Now, what are the challenges in the fabric sector, and how can we preserve the transmission of know-how to use it as an asset for a sustainable fashion industry on the continent? Thank you very much. I am concerned about establishing a link between creation and production. In the video that we saw, we saw that Africa produces 90% of cotton, organic cotton, and I wonder what we do with it. We have developed traditional weaving in Senegal with the different weaving looms. We increased them to move from 90 centimeters to 140 centimeters. And now we want to move up to the pre-industrial stage and be able to provide to some fabric which not come from abroad. You have a market of 30 billion, and this money, most of this money goes abroad. So I think that we need to solve our economic issues in Africa. We have to process our cotton. We have to produce threads. We are always looking for cotton fabric, very good quality cotton fabric. In Africa, there is a plant that we are reopening in Senegal. It's a huge plant. They produce a thread. They can even print. And this plant has been dormant for 20 years while the textile industry export cotton from outside Senegal. So I don't know what is the situation for other countries, but we have actually bought equipment from plants which were closing down, and we want to produce basic good quality material for the designers. Thank you very much for this comment. How can we make sure that Africa is the next plant of the world? Now, let me go back to you, Alfadi. You are, as you said earlier on, the founder of the International Festival of African Fashion. It was set up in 1993, and you are working to set up a fashion school in Niger. So funding is very important, and it's mentioned in UNESCO's report. Could you share with us your take on training needs in Africa in order to have quality training on the continent? Thank you once again to UNESCO. Thank you, Toussaint, for raising this issue of training. Not aging, but as you said, we started 40 years ago. It's about also transmission. Iman Ayisi maybe came 6 or 7 times to Niger for the International Festival of African Fashion. We may be a poor country. Maybe we do not have 200 million inhabitants, but we are countries which are brotherly countries, and for almost 10 years now, I've worked to develop ESMA, University on Art and Design. We have $30 million provided by the World Bank. We do have a space, but we have difficult political situations with military coups. I want to see Mr. Matoko and Mr. Toussaint can testify to that. I wanted us to write to the ministers of culture so that we can train our children. I went to see Mr. Anthony. Is very nice. I discussed financing issues. I wanted him to write to ADB, to all the banks, so that we can fund African creation. Iman Ayisi cannot grow on his own if he doesn't have my very good friend who is sitting next to me, who is going to support his production. Where Yves Saint Laurent was not alone. Pierre Berger was there to provide support. Louis Vuitton with LVMH was able to achieve major things. We are a great continent, and for training, it's very important. Let me speak about school. It's very important.
School is very important. For 10 years now, we've been fighting. I created a wonderful school where we started with 70 young female students. And this project was based on UN funding, which contributed more than $150 million so that this project could be launched in Niger. And this worked despite the situation on the ground. But the spirit is there, and we've been working with colleagues, with different experts, with the different fashion weeks, and they could be sent to these places.
C'est très important pour nous que l'Afrique se donne la main, mais
it's essential to work together, but education is really the foundation of everything. If we're not educated, we can't do much. So we now have 3 months of professional training, and we would like UNESCO to be able to support this space. And I think that this can go very far if we manage to train our children and educate them in the field of creativity. As you said, education is also under UNESCO's mandate. And when it comes to training in all these different jobs, the designers need to have a framework that will help them move their creativity forward. And also for more technical jobs, they need to learn the right technical techniques in order to be able to do their job. And I'd like to also thank the students of these fashion schools that are here in the room with us today. And I'd like to also come back to you, Iman, since this is something you already brought up in the answer to your first question. The question of the use of traditional textiles, such as kente or raffia, in the African fashion sector. As you've stated, you refuse of working and using wax in your designs. Can you talk to us about this approach, and more specifically about what the continent can bring to the international fashion sector by the use of African textiles? So I think it's unfair. Everyone loves Africa, but at the end of the day, we're sort of trampled underfoot. So when it comes to our pride, we need to base ourselves on African fabrics. Many things have been forgotten. Many elders still use old weaving machines, as the young generation thinks that this takes too much time. But there are, luckily, women, I call them the guardians of, or the custodians of art, such as Elsa Jun, who have been able to set things up. But we need to wake up and we need to retake ownership of our own heritage through education, through getting access to the right information. We need to help the world discover our traditional resources. And that's what I've tried to do at my small level when I have collections. I've spread information about Ghanaian Kente, about Burkina Faso techniques, about Ndopian Raffia from Cameroon, about Manja from Senegal. And these things have to be made well weaved, they have to be made beautiful. We need to use good cotton, and this is something you highlighted earlier, Madame Issa-Dion. In our African countries today, we have problems getting good quality cotton. You know, there's a lot of cotton in Africa, but we can't process it ourselves. There used to be factories in the past that have been forgotten about, and they're not modern enough. People need to be retrained, and factories need to be modernized in order to be able to transform fabric and process it. We do this with Pekia, but that's not enough. So cotton is then sent abroad, and when it comes back, it's too expensive. So that is a serious challenge. So all of this is something we need to change and work on, and this is just a statement of what's happening. I'm not trying to complain, it's just a statement of what's happening, an observation. And Africans have to buy what Africans produce. And we mustn't forget Africa. And we can't do this if we don't have the right educational foundations. We need to lay these foundations, and that is essential for us. Thank you, Iman. This is very inspiring. And now I'd like to turn to Omoyemi.
You work closely with the new generations of fashion designers who come to showcase their work during the Lagos Fashion Week. How can we better support young and emerging designers in this sector?
Thank you so much. Since Lagos Fashion Week's inception in 2011, we've dedicated the platform to supporting young talents, like you said. It used to be called Young Designer of the Year, and we've had some of the great designers that we know today, from Ejiro Mustafiri, Orange Culture, Emi Casbit, Kenneth Eze, Lagos Space Program. I can go on and on. I've come through that platform. It's not always been at the level that we want it to be in terms of support to be able to accelerate their work or their growth. But I think it's some of the things that we need to be doing to support young talent is, first things first, is to give them room. And that's why for us and to us at Lagos Fashion Week, it's important that we're always providing opportunities for discovering new talent. Because if we didn't open the doors in 2011 to some of those brands, I guess you can fill in the blanks. So, but in addition to giving them room and to holding, giving them that opportunity to be able to be part of different, showcasing opportunities, not just with us. Like you said, one of the reasons why I like this report is there are about 32, I think, fashion weeks across the continent. So there are different people in different countries, who are constantly ensuring that, they provide opportunities for young designers and young talent, from Dakar Fashion Week to to SA Fashion Week to even Glitz Fashion Africa. So what they need the most is some of the things that's listed. I'm so sorry, I'm going to keep referring to this until you've all read it, because once you read the report, a lot of things become demystified in that sense. So from ensuring that we're in constant conversation with our government, what role are they playing to support us so that we can support them, In Nigeria now, thankfully, there's a Ministry for Creative Economy, and of course we have Trade and Investment, and we look forward to working with them closely, because, to be able to empower us and to be able to ensure that they're empowered as well. Secondly, providing opportunities for investment. I'm also happy to be on the stage with people like Lauren, people who actually have access to creating the sort of pool of funds that they need. Every year we have over about 100 designers who pass through the platform, either through our showcase in April or through October. The vision has always been to be able to ensure that they have access to, to some sort of funding. It could be investment opportunity, it could be through grants, it could be through loans, which is something that's not very common across Africa. I think 2020 we're able to galvanize our government to be able to raise about $1 million, which in today is not a lot of money, but there and then in the middle of COVID, we realized that a lot of designers needed a bit of respite and to be able to provide and offer that sort of funding. But we need access to a bit more, and we need to be able to differentiate between a lot of designers depending on what stage the designers are. Is it a grant? Is it a loan? Is it investment? And to be able to do that, we need to be able to create opportunities for educating young talent, young designers to even begin to understand the difference between all of that. Because sometimes, the announcements around this is what's happening and people think it's free money. Maybe it's a loan, and if it's a loan so that they understand the difference, how am I able to access it? How do I even write my business plan? And, the list is endless. So that brings me to education. We all know that the creative sector within Africa is still largely informal. I mean, there are countries like South Africa, and dare I say even Ghana, compared to maybe Nigeria, that already have institutions of higher learning, that offer so much to designers. While we do have them, extensive conversations need to happen to ensure that there's a complete overhaul of the system. How up to date are they, from curriculum to even access to resources to be able to keep the faculties going. Those are the things that's super important that we need to pay attention to. How do we decolonize the curriculums? What are the people even learning? I find that the greatest teachers sometimes are still in communities far-flung across Africa. Yes, I'm referring to the skills, to the artisans who've, through informal education have passed down skills from generation to generation. And that's why I really respect the work ISA has done to be able to create, like crafts villages. How do we create craft villages? So while there's a clamor for formal education, there's also a clamor for the informal, to ensure that those skill sets are not lost because they're very valuable. How do we keep ensuring that we pass them on to the next generation? How do we even document them? Because I find that, sometimes the challenge is where some of these fabrics and some of this, aspects of our culture, they're being reintroduced to us in form of technology. But, we all know what goes into creating some of these beautiful works of art, and that's what makes it true luxury. And of course, how do we support them? Providing opportunities for access to market, ensuring that there's more onshoring of production in Africa. I've been in rooms where people are clamoring for production in other parts of the world because they think it would be better. And yeah, that's great thinking, but I'm constantly advocating to ensure that every part of the value chain starts within the continent and ends on the continent. That's the only way we can create value addition. So if it means that we have to invest in manufacturing to be able to ensure that the designers produce in Africa, then that's what we have to do. So that's probably, if that's where the investment needs to start, how do we empower existing factories to be able to produce for designers? We have no business in manufacturing, but a few years ago we had to speak to the government in Nigeria to make accessible a facility to us so that we can help support, some designers. And today we can't even meet the demand. We produce for 1 or 2 brands only, a facility that has only about 130 something machines. We're training around the clock and we're constantly trying to produce. But when I even say produce, I'm not talking about highly skilled collections. I'm even talking about basics, and we're struggling with it, So imagine if investment is focused in that area to be able to support many more factories like that in different countries across the continent. That will support the designers. It takes one thing off their table, because constantly they function as a government. They provide their light. They power in terms that they have to power the space they work in. They produce themselves. They are the designers. They support get their own water. They teach themselves. They handle their own finances, and that's too much. So by last year, it's only natural that designers get burnt out because they're doing everything. So sorry if when I start, I just go on. I can go on and on, So which goes back to what I said at the beginning. it's time to stop talking, because I'm sure I've not said anything new, that we all know they go through these things. So how do we sit with the key stakeholders in the room when it comes to bringing in technology, when it comes to manufacturing? Are we speaking to UNIDO? UNIDO, I've worked extensively with UNIDO in Nigeria, but what do we need to do to, to sort of take that manufacturing to the next level across the continent? So young designers can produce. They have no business trying to set up factories of their own. That takes their money. They can focus on running a business. So I'm glad you mentioned that, there's a second session that's going to focus on investment opportunities, where the investors, how many hoops do creators have to jump, So there are banks who've made this affordable, but then they're looking for designers who are looking for about $500,000, $1 million. No, they're not looking for that. That's too much. Sometimes it could be, what could make the difference could be anything between $10,000 and $50,000 or $50,000 and $100,000. So how can you help them, access it? I will sit in rooms with people who have investment companies. They're like, oh my gosh, what we expected to see from the designers is not what they actually have. They don't have books, they don't have this. There's nothing to invest in. Yes, there's nothing to invest in. So there's no free money. Everybody and anybody who wants to invest in this sector, you must be ready to, roll up your sleeves and let's do the hard work. And I think that together we can do it to get to where we need to go to. Thank you.
Very strong. Thank you very much,
To me, it's a very important point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think, in the end, what people tend not to understand is that it's a question of business model. Because, as Omoyemi said, there is no free money. So when a designer needs, for example, 50K USD, the chances that its activity won't be profitable are really high. So then subsidies or grants are necessary. So we are in the stage where the African creativity doesn't need charity. It's not the point. What we're saying is finding the right business model. And coming back to production, for instance, when you look at the production capacities in Africa, it's important that they are subsidized because it won't be profitable. So, in a nutshell, je pense, je reviens, pardon, en français.
And I'll switch back to French. It's very important to tell oneself that the business model of creative industry will be subsidized if we want to reach our goals. We want to create what we want to create. And education is crucial, of course. If you look at France, there's a very fertile ecosystem. There's the French Institute of Fashion, the Institut Français de la Mode. There are round tables. And there are many, we'll speak about it in the round table afterwards, but so when we saw these ecosystems in France, we said that we can try and import this sort of ecosystem to Africa, because you can't duplicate the same models in 54 different countries. So we created this incubator with the French Fashion Institute, and we've managed to have an impact in Africa. But it can't be possible for in all countries or in all companies. And we've managed to work with 21 different companies. And why not more? Because there are different companies that are not profitable and that can't find financing. And to find investors who will accept a finance without a return on investment is extremely rare. So as an investor, we tell ourselves that the international institutions and donors accept to play the role of subsidizing production, training, investment, and financing in order to be able to see more virtuous business models. And that is exactly what we're trying to do today, to launch this call for partnerships, to be able to see how we can work together to reach these goals. So maybe if I can give you the floor afterwards, maybe? Oh, no, it's about organization when it comes to getting access to investment. We need to work together. When we talked about Lagos or about FEMA, or South Africa, with Motsepe, they contacted me to make sure that we work together. UNESCO is not working just for Francophone Africa and or Nigeria. We need to all work together. I welcomed 54 countries in my institute, in my house. So I absolutely need to highlight the fact that we need to work together for these things to work. If it comes from Lagos, that's great. If it comes from UNESCO, it's great. If it comes from Niger, it's great too. And I also wanted to make a link to another sector, which is jewelry. We created over 40,000 jobs in Niger in the field of jewelry. And I understand that Depine worked on, I understood that people worked on African cloth, but something that we worked on as well. But I wanted to say that... You wanted to say something, sorry. Yes, I wanted to say that in Africa we need to speak the same language when it comes to African crafts. We need to speak the same language. Sometimes we feel that there's maybe an opposition between the French-speaking African world and the English-speaking world, and we're kind of spread out thin, because sometimes the French speakers are doing something, their own thing, and the English speakers are doing their own thing as well. But we have to work together. We have to be united. Yes, exactly. And that's what we're trying to do here in UNESCO. We are defending a united Africa beyond linguistic divides. But I do understand this and the importance of bringing everyone together and to have integrated markets too. And that's why the African Union, with the free trade zone that is that's going to be implemented, this should allow intra-African exchanges.
Chabel, you are a founder of Creativity Champion and co-founder of the African Youth Mentorship Network and champion for Made in Africa. Can you tell us more about the impact of these initiatives on the youth of Africa?
For me to be able to give you the impact, I'll give you context as to what I do. I conceptualized and ran a platform that is now called Canex Presents Africa at Portugal Fashion. And the idea behind this was really to see how we can create a shortcut to promoting African fashion. And with that program, we give access to, we give access to designers on 3 levels. One is the exposure around the storytelling on what African fashion is, and that's through showcasing in partnership with Portugal Fashion Week. Then we provide access to capacity building through mentorship programs, but also access to manufacturing and production capacities, especially for designers who are looking to sell wholesale at grand scale and don't necessarily have the capacity in Africa because we understand the infrastructural problems. And lastly, through access to markets with partnerships with Tranoï Paris. So in that sense, then, it's almost like an ecosystem that we've created. And in the 3 years that we've worked, we've had 70 designers that have gone through the program. And last year, with Tranoï, we had sales for 17 designers at the tune of €1 million. And they sell anywhere from Japan to the US, Europe, and also in Africa. So, you look at it from the outside in, and the idea is to provide a proof of concept that African fashion is a business first and foremost, and it is a lucrative business. Obviously, it is heavily supported by the Afrexim Bank, because without that investment, we wouldn't be where we are right now. And for you to understand what impact that project has done, I'll give a story and I'll share an example that I like to use very much. One of the designers we work with, a brand is called Vanu Vamwe. And it's an accessories brand based out of Zimbabwe. They use recycled tire filaments to create this thread that they make these crochet bags in the middle of a village in Zimbabwe. When she came on our program in March 2022, she had 50 women she was working with. And incidentally, these women actually rehabilitated prison women. And she showcased in Portugal Fashion and subsequently has done 3 editions at Tranoï. She has, in the 3 years, 3 editions, been able to sell over 2,000 bags. She has increased her staff from 50 women to 158 women. And she has a turnover of over $200,000, right? So that is one side of what she does. She's also a PhD holder in design. And she's been able, within the cohort of the program, being able to also help and champion other designers in the business of fashion. She has collaborated with designers in Cote d'Ivoire, in South Africa, Nigeria to create products for them as well. So these are fashion brands, and they've ventured into the accessory brand space, and they've made collaborations to work together to produce bags for them. In addition to that, the same cohort has actually come together. They now have a shared lookbook and line sheet, and they pool money and resources together to fund their production. So this is just a small example to show the impact and the potential these sort of collaborations have. We just need to multiply them by 1 million.
Okay, well understood. Well understood. So now let me turn to you, Aïssa Dion. No, to Laurine before. Yes, Laurine, le rapport de l'UNESCO.
Laurine, UNESCO's report tells us that the fashion industry in Africa is made up of SMEs, up to 90% of. They make up to 90% of the fashion industry. From your viewpoint, how can we establish conditions for growth for larger firms that could then boost all of the industry? Thank you very much for this question, because I think it really is at the heart of the industry's development long term. 90% of these brands work in the informal sector. And so there are many things that we could do. Firstly, we can start with institutionalizing these brands and working on structure. And I'd like to come back to the idea of the accelerators that we had put in place. When there is when a designer is working, this designer must become an entrepreneur. After that, and I'd like to give an example using Côte d'Ivoire. We realized that many of the brands that we wanted to fund were not registered. They had no institutional or legal existence, but they did have a turnover and they made money. So we had a partnership with the local business confederation in order to create a gateway of sorts with a 72-hour procedure for brands to obtain a legal existence or representation of sorts. So this applies to any other industry, by the way. We must support the institutionalization of brands in order to support a sustainable industry. However, many brands say the following. After we actually institutionalize, we will have to pay many taxes. So this step is not sufficient. Every country must create the favorable conditions from a tax point of view in order to support the structuring of these firms. Now, I'm talking about taxes, but this also applies to law and to all of the other facets of the environment in which these businesses operate in order to support the growth of the industry. This is why I called for the creation of a Pan-African organization of fashion. Because if we look at banking, telecommunications, any industry in Africa has a strong institutional player. And for any issue, we have an organization that's continent-wide, and that's what made the industry work. So I believe that a Pan-African organization on fashion would help us work on capacity building, on fundraising, on intellectual property protection, on the tax arrangements. And I think that this will make it possible for us to have one unified voice to engage in dialogue with international partners. We have to create a structure at the national level, but also at the regional level for each of these pillars for growth and development rather than obstacles. Thank you. Thank you very much. This really echoes what Lulu Chabel was saying before, the need to find solutions in terms of governance issues. And now, I just wanted to say something on tax arrangements. Indeed, it was requested that 25% of African cotton be processed, but the VAT rate that's applied is 18%. So if you want to sell a shirt, for example, you owe 18% of VAT to the state. You don't have a special rate for fashion designers. And I've been talking about this for years, and what I'm told is these are the rules and we can't change them. And I wanted to stress that. Yes, indeed. So this is a comment. So this was a comment to the attention of WIMO, the Economic Integration Organization in Africa. Now, our research shows that 37 countries make cotton, and 81% of the cotton is exported in order to be sold afterwards, after being processed at a higher price on the continent. And we know that processing workshops and plants have closed on the continent in the 90s. And for example, in Nigeria only, there were 175 cotton processing plants, and little by little, all of these plants closed down. Now, Issa Dion, according to you, how could we revitalize the textile industry in Africa? Thank you very much. I believe that this industry could lead to the creation of millions of jobs. After the industry collapsed, all of these jobs disappeared. And now we do have an example in Senegal. I managed to preserve a tiny textile processing plant, and I actually used looms that I took from plants that were closing down. And we used them, and we created a new type of industry with an evolving quality for the fabric that we were making. It's somewhere between hand-woven and a mechanical form of processing the fabric. And now, with the agreement of the cotton company, we are launching this initiative. We are bringing together the government, the cotton company, but also the plant that is going to be brought to life again. And we have engaged a dialogue between these players. So what we've moved on to, we went from a mode of production that was more of a crafts type, and now we're moving to a manufacture step. We are creating agreements with the plant in order to bring it back to life and to also put it in relationship with fashion designers. And we also wanted to serve as example in other countries, in Ghana, in Benin, in Côte d'Ivoire, because it's the same situation for these plants. And I have to say that customers abroad tend to like this quality. Now, of course, we have this very technical machinery that makes highly technical fabric, but they are soulless in a way. And I think that we could find our spot in the luxury market if our products have a soul. Thank you very much. Thank you, Issa Dion. We are reaching the end of this first panel. I would like to thank all of you. Thank you for your experiences. Thank you for sharing with us. I think that they deserve a round of applause. Before we move on to the second session, I'd like to pay tribute to the work of the Kenyan artist Thandiwe Muriu. We used one of her photographs as the cover for the UNESCO report. I also wanted to thank the 193 Gallery in Paris, the director, Mr. César Lévy, and the curator, Marie-Lou Nguesek. I'd like to thank them for this absolutely exceptional staging that is surrounding us for our event today. I'd like to welcome Marie-Lou Nguesek, who is going to introduce the artist's work, and let us once again give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you.
Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I make a short presentation, I'd like to give the floor briefly to Thandiwe Moriou. Thank you.
My name is Thandiwe Moriou, and I'm an artist living and working in Nairobi, Kenya. As part of my artistic practice, I use textiles and photography to give social commentary about my experience being a modern woman in a traditional culture. In my work, I use the Ankara textile, which is not a Kenyan textile. We view it more as a West African textile, but it is widely worn across the continent and definitely in Kenya. The Ankara textile is the fabric that we wear when we want to look our best. So if you're going for a wedding, if you're going to give an important speech, or if you're going to church, this is the textile you'd make an outfit from. What is fun about our dress-up culture in Nairobi and in Kenya is that it's almost a collaborative process between yourself and your tailor when you make a garment. A fabric like Ankara is sold in rolls of 6 yards. And so when you purchase the fabric, you go to your tailor and they will tell you what's in fashion, what they think looks good on you, what your neighbor, which outfit your neighbor made, and then you'll tell them what you like, your preferences in terms of style, and together you create this beautiful garment that you wear to your special occasion. Because of this cultural practice, as part of my own artistic work, I work with tailors in Nairobi to stitch custom garments that I design for my images. My garments match the background of my image, and together they create this blending effect where my subject disappears into the background. And that's what I use as my platform to speak my message around womanhood and how women are often invisible to their cultures. I think it's important for me to be based in Kenya as an artist because my work is so deeply influenced by my people and how we live, our beauty culture, how we interact with objects. And so creating from home allows me to continue to be inspired every day by Kenyans and their interaction with the textiles that they wear. Alors, comme vous avez pu le
As you saw, Thandiwe Moriou is someone who truly loves colors. When we contacted her in 2020, she actually thought that we were pranking her, and she couldn't believe that we had called her. After that, her work traveled all over the world. Her staging is using the works from her latest work in Paris, and that work is actually echoing the experience of artists and creators from the African continent. At our gallery, what we want to do is to present the diversity of all the different creators in their own right. We want to present the unexpected and sometimes the work of creators that is not accepted elsewhere. Art is an incredible tool. It tells us so much about others and about ourselves. By way of conclusion, I'd like to quote the proverb, "Love letter to myself." A little rain every day will make the rivers overflow. Thank you very much, Marie. Thank you, and thank you to the Galleries 193, Galerie 193. I'd like to thank our panelists, and now we are going to move on to our second session.
On fera la photo de groupe après.
Perhaps we could take the picture later on. Now let us move on to our second panel. So this panel will focus on the partnership incubator. We are going to have speakers from strategic institutions working on the development of the fashion industry. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Julien Pelot. And I'd like to ask the panelists to come up on stage as well. Mr. Thomas Delattre. He is the director of the Fashion Entrepreneurship Center at the French Institute for Design. Patrick Dufy, founder of Global Fashion Exchange. Amar Kessap.
Bank. Gina Luciani, vice-présidente Fonds de dotation.
Gina Luciani, who is a vice chair for the Fonds de dotation Maison Mode Méditerranée. Jesse Reynolds, who's the head of the Impact Fund for African Creatives Enterprises, and Megan McAstaker.
Fund. Julien, c'est à toi.
Merci beaucoup Toussaint.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Toussaint. I am delighted to be here with you. Give us just a minute. We are all settling down. I think that everyone is seated now.
Thank you to the panelists of the first panel for the very interesting discussion, which echoes what we are going to discuss in the second part. We need some water. Thank you very much. And during the first panel, we heard about the importance of education, investments, technology, innovation, having also political leaders supporting fashion in Africa, and the importance of partnership. So we are going to dwell on these issues as well as others. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here today. I wanted to say something else. Omoyemi Akerele stressed the need for action, and we want to discuss that. We have a very good report that is giving us an overview of fashion in Africa. What do we do about it? How do we move from talking to acting? So we want to discuss that with you, with the activities that you're already conducting and what you could do. First, let's go around to understand what are your activities. An introductory word on the work of your organization, what you're doing, what are your partners, and the challenges that you meet every day in your activity. Patrick Duffy, you're the founder of Global Fashion Exchange.
Everything? Yes. Very short. I'm so sorry, I didn't have the translator thingy on, so okay. No, I'm so sorry. I think I got it. No, it's fine. It's fine. I think I got it. I just was just a little bit starstruck by everybody up here on the panel. Thank you so much for UNESCO and for having this incredible panel talking about the importance of African fashion. It's been an incredible experience to be here so far. So thank you. My name is Patrick Duffy. I'm the founder of Global Fashion Exchange, and I guess we talk about what we do. I have a presentation. I'm not sure. There it is. There it is. So does it switch or how does?
They will switch.
Okay, so Global Fashion Exchange, what are we? Who are we? We're a platform that catalyzes circularity in the fashion industry, in the consumer space, in the B2B space. And we launched Global Fashion Exchange back in 2013 when I had a aha moment and realized that the industry that I was working in before, which was entertainment, PR, marketing, and production, was contributing to a terrible contributing to the fashion industry's negative impacts, which is harmful for people and planet. So when I had that aha moment, I discovered a clothing swap. So I can't really see because the light is coming into my eyes, but I have a question, and it's kind of interactive. So I wanted to know, how many people have heard of a clothing swap before or participated in one? Can I see a show of hands? What? A clothing swap? Okay. I guess that means we need to do more work, because the work that we started in 2013 was to catalyze the idea through the act of clothing swap. So what are we? We're a platform essentially to transform, the goal is to transform the entire fashion industry through engaging content, through education, and through action. That action is a clothing swap. And next slide, can we go to the next? Thank you so much. And so the mission is, we want to inspire, we want to empower people worldwide, and we want them to really understand how they can take action through their closets, through the act of swapping and sharing. And so we do that, like I said, with engaging content. We do events similar to this one, where we bring key stakeholders together to talk about the issues of pre-consumer waste, post-consumer waste, text, and we're aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals and how to tell that story. And we partner with brands, nonprofits, to raise awareness and to help people close the loop. So what is it? I essentially just explained what it is, but essentially we create these really engaging events with some of our partners that are here today, which I'm really excited to share more about that, where we actually bring people together and have a conversation. We have a clothing swap, which is why I asked that question before. And it's essentially where people bring clothing from their closets that is no longer used, and we help them understand why it's important to not put that clothing into waste and to extend the life of that clothing. And then also help them, we like to share and catalyze the stories around the clothing to help people understand how to get more deeply connected to their garments. And this is an exciting one. You can see it? Oh, you can't see it. Oh, you can't see it. Okay. Okay, perfect. Sorry, I'm a little confused. So this is how we got here. How did we get to the African conversation, which is like super exciting for me. So our network, our ambassadors, our cherished partners, which many of them are here today, and I have to clap my hands for those people, because they're the ones that have championed this idea and brought it to these beautiful places which have been making such a huge impact. So you can see the list here: Nigeria, Senegal, Kenya, Sudan, Egypt, Ghana, Zimbabwe. These are just the few of the countries that we've activated in. And you can maybe see on the picture some people that were just on the panel here, Omoyemi. And basically taking the idea, the education, the toolkits, and we really collaborate with these key stakeholders and these important champions for change in these places and help activate. So that's been a really exciting thing for us. And so another really important piece of what we do with Global Fashion Exchange is create content. And we have a partner here. I'm not sure if any of you have seen the magazine called IRC, which is right outside. We're going to invite you to come and take pictures with us after the event. But IRC is a Paris-based magazine, which I'm super proud to be a part of as the director of sustainability. And we create beautiful stories, and we help bring what's happening in places like Africa to the world through our publication, through online, through the print, and through photography, and through film. So that's what we do.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Patrick. A wide range of activities. So let's turn to you, Jesse. Jesse Reynolds, you're the partner of the Impact Fund for African Creatives. So can you also give us a quick overview of what you do and how you support fashion in Africa?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So the Impact Fund for African Creatives is a $100 million fund that we've set up in order to boost investment into the creative economy across Africa. So obviously we're here to talk about fashion, so I'm going to tailor it to just the fashion space that we work in. But we use different interventions and kind of use a multifaceted approach in order to address different areas of the value chain, whether that's investing in textile recycling and manufacturing centers, creative hubs, looking at doing direct investment into creatives themselves, or supporting business accelerator programs through our partner, the African Fashion Foundation. And so for us, one of the main things that we obviously really noticed was obviously the lack of funding in this space. But it goes beyond that. And so we've also expanded to then be working on having different conversations around standardizing intellectual property rights for creatives across Africa. Just because if you don't know, there's that for the French governing bodies and for the English governing bodies. And so just trying to make sure that it kind of cuts across all of the countries rather than just focusing in on English speaking versus French speaking. We're looking at kind of working with different governments in order to create more enabling environments when it comes to the infrastructure and logistics needs of creatives and being able to import and export goods at different rates and whatnot. And so we really are obviously doing our best to do investment in terms of different types of investment, because I think at the end of the day, this isn't tech, this isn't any of the traditional industries. You can't just give somebody money in exchange for equity. You have to kind of really look at the alternative financing models that you can use, if it's debt, if it's grants, if it's loans. And I mean, we had wonderful panelists up here from the last panel discussing these things as well. But just to echo it, because at the end of the day, it is a very bespoke approach that you have to take. It's a one-on-one individual basis. It's not just an open call for applications where if you meet these criteria, this revenue number, all of these things, then you can get XYZ amount of investment. You really have to look at, I guess, what the challenges these designers face are. Challenges that we face, we're based in Ghana, sorry, I forgot to mention that, but challenges that our designers face in Ghana are going to be very different than those that are based in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Senegal. Just because we have geographic proximity to them, there's so many different things along kind of the infrastructure level, the policy levels, and all of the different spaces and challenges that they face that you have to take into consideration when you're looking to invest in creatives and especially in fashion brands. Although there are a lot of these things to consider, it definitely is a fantastic space that has a very promising return on investment in terms of either direct investment into creatives or into things like manufacturing centers and kind of all of the different value chain enablements that you can look at. And so we're really working hard at IFAC in order to not just boost the investment side of things, but then also provide different skills training through accelerators, through incubators, through events, through value chain huddles, and really look at how we can work to support creatives outside of just giving them money, but also help them prepare to scale into international markets.
Great. Well, super interesting, and that actually really echoes a lot of what we heard in the first panel, not just in terms of what's already being done, but also in terms of the needs. So thank you for highlighting this. Let's hear from you, Thomas. Thomas Delattre est le directeur du Centre pour l'entrepreneuriat de l'Institut français de la mode. Donc, dites-nous aussi en quelques mots, quelle est votre activité pour la mode en Afrique?
Oui, bonjour à toutes et à tous.
What are the activities that you have in the area of fashion in Africa? First of all, I'd like to thank UNESCO for having invited us, gathering us here. It's the first time that I have the opportunity to discuss with the institutions, creators, partners, beyond our own initiatives. And I think that this type of gathering is very important. I'd like to pick up on different issues as the professor that I am. But if you do not know the Institut Français de la Mode, it is actually a training institute from the lowest to the highest level. In Africa, we use our legitimate role with partners, and we are humble, as Lorraine also mentioned. What we do is training, education, and research. Lorraine from Birimian mentioned the accelerator that we set up together. There are already 2 editions with 20 creators, designers, who were supported in Senegal. We also have some research with Malik Ndiaye as the scientific director. He is from the University of Dakar. And we spent a day to try and raise awareness on the preservation of Senegalese know-how. But beyond Senegal, there were other countries participating. And I'm really highlighting this example because it was a co-scientific leadership, someone from our institute, and also Malik Ndiaye. We are involved in training in Togo, for instance, with a local player. We build capacity in the area of collection building, from the material to the final collection, and on education and supporting entrepreneurs. We have a new incubation system at the local level in Benin with a semester. Very interesting. We will pick up on that later on in the second part.
Vous êtes vice-présidente du fonds de dotation Maison Mode Méditerranée. Donc, pouvez-vous aussi nous dire vos activités et votre action en Afrique?
Bien sûr, oui, je tiens à remercier aussi, comme Thomas, l'UNESCO pour cette invitation et cet échange tellement riche sur les questions qui nous concernent dans nos métiers. Moi, je suis donc Gina Luciani, vice-présidente du fonds de dotation Maison Mode Méditerranée. Alors, j'aimerais aborder l'histoire un petit peu comme j'ai pu entendre tout à l'heure, parce que c'est vrai qu'il y a toute une histoire au fonds de dotation qui a commencé il y a déjà 35 ans, avec Marilyn Bellieu-Vigouroux auprès de Azzedine Alaya, qui ont lancé donc cette initiative de soutien à la Méditerranée et à la région africaine, donc sur des régions bien spécifiques, et qui souhaitaient par-dessus tout préserver le patrimoine immatériel et le faire rayonner. Et ils l'ont fait, ils l'ont fait à travers plusieurs pôles. Ils ont travaillé sur le pôle culturel avec la mise en place d'un musée de la mode à Marseille. Marseille, qui est deuxième ville de France, épicentre culturel de cette région méditerranéenne et africaine. Et puis ils l'ont fait aussi à travers donc des bourses, le soutien des créateurs donc ces créateurs maintenant sont comptés au nombre de 200 créateurs et chercheurs quand même dans 21 pays de la Méditerranée et de l'Afrique, avec plus de 19 lauréats africains. Donc, je dirais, avec le temps, ils ont assis une expertise sur la région. Et moi, j'ai intégré le fonds en tant que lauréate en 2016 de ma marque Occidente, qui est axée développement durable, parce qu'il y a aussi tous ces aspects de développement durable dont on a entendu parler tout à l'heure et qui sont très importants pour le soutien du fonds, le développement durable, l'humain, le soutien aux femmes, à l'égalité des genres. Et donc, j'ai pu échanger en tant que créatrice et emmener peut-être mon savoir en tant que maître artisan d'art. Donc, nos lauréats, ils sont soutenus financièrement. Ils ont aussi des échanges avec des experts que nous rassemblons lors d'événements comme les correspondances qui ont eu lieu en juin dernier. Ils échangent avec des personnalités qui peuvent leur donner leur expertise, comme Louis Barthélemy, Serge Carrera par exemple récemment. Mais aussi, ils existent à proprement dit, comme le disait Madame Azoulay tout à l'heure, avec toute la liberté d'expression, la liberté culturelle qu'ils apportent, et que nous, on va soutenir donc à travers cette programmation, ces finances, et leur inspiration aussi, puisque Iman Aïssi, par exemple, est très inspirant. Il parlait tout à l'heure, il est un modèle pour nos créateurs. Et puis, je pense aussi à Mossi Traoré, par exemple, avec les ateliers d'Alix, qui ont une grande action avec une communauté malienne. Et donc, cet accompagnement, il est là dans une volonté, si vous voulez, que les créateurs puissent faire rayonner leur art, puissent rester localement, tout en échangeant, en passant par Marseille, mais aussi par Paris, et en ayant donc cette espèce de tremplin international qui va les emmener vers le développement de leurs projets. Donc, c'est une véritable coopération internationale, finalement. Et on compte donc dans le panel de nos lauréats 35% de réussite vraiment internationale conséquente. Nos lauréats ont par exemple gagné des prix, je pense Louis-Gabriel Nouchi avec l'Andam en 2023, Ahmed Amer, Cynthia Merage qui sont au FTA. Donc ils ont c'est un véritable tremplin. On observe en fait concrètement les actions et leur portée. Et on a la fierté d'avoir 80% quand même de femmes dans ces lauréats. Alors, voilà.
Merci beaucoup. Très intéressant, et l'importance du mentorat, de l'accompagnement, de l'éducation. Et aussi, merci de rappeler le lien avec...
Mentoring education is very important, and the relationship with sustainable development is very important. And we heard what the Director General said earlier on. She said that fashion is a driver of change.
Principal specialist for the African Development Bank, and you lead on a program called Fashionomics, if I understood it correctly, or is it, no? So you will tell us more about what you do. Over to you.
Très bien. Ok, merci. Je me joins.
Thank you. I would like to echo the previous members of the panel to thank UNESCO. That gives me the opportunity to explain what ADB does to support this strategic sector. The African Development Bank is today the first financial institution in Africa. Its headquarters are in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, with the different countries represented, and a regional directorate in the number 5.
The African Development Bank is working more and more on developing cultural industries in Africa. This work was driven by Mr. Adesina, the head of the bank. And more specifically, this work focuses, the work dealing in the sector of fashion is based on an initiative called Fashionomics that we launched. And this is a platform that allows designers, fashion designers, to connect between each other, and it also connects them to investors, investors as well as consumers. There are 4 main pillars underpinning this initiative. It's a hub that allows one to undertake feasibility studies and impact studies for companies that are working in the fashion sector and the textile industry. It's also an academy that trains stakeholders within the sector thanks to masterclasses and webinars, as well as training sessions. It also means resources. This Fashionomics initiative allows us to mobilize resources, funding for entrepreneurs in the fashion industry. And it's also an online shop that allows African fashion designers to showcase their works in order to be able to bring them to the international market, and not only the local market. Fashionomics is also an annual award, that is awarded every year to an African fashion designer. It's an initiative that brings together different partners that contribute directly or indirectly to the project within the African Development Bank. As you know, the bank is made up of different funds, and there's one of these funds is the Fund for Developing the Private Sector, that is the main donor, the main financing of this program. There's also the Afrexim Bank, which is a bank that is also supporting the sector, and then the private sector is represented by DHL, that is a private partner that's part of this initiative. So in a nutshell, that is what the African Development Bank has been doing, and I'll take the floor a bit later to speak more about the practical involvement and application of the bank in the fashion sector.
Something about fashionomics. I was not completely off mark. So before we go to a second round of questions, one of our invitees could not join us in person, so we're going to watch a brief video message from her. That's Megan McAstocker, she from the Fashion Impact Fund.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Megan McAstocker, and I am the Director of Events for the Public Foundation, an innovative foundation that creates and manages transformative programs and partnerships that advance sustainability and social impact around the world. I'm unable to join you in person today, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share with you information on the work of one of our core programs, the Fashion Impact Fund. The Fashion Impact Fund supports skills and training programs led by women for women to achieve education, employment, and economic inclusion. The fund's multifaceted mission aims to advance women's financial independence, combat poverty, discrimination, and gender-based violence, and promote positive change within the fashion industry. By investing in the fashion workforce development solutions for women, we create lasting and transformative impact on their lives, communities, and the sector globally. I would like to highlight two of the African organizations that the Fashion Impact Fund is currently supporting. We funded the African Academy of Fashion, established by one of each and located in Cape Town, South Africa, through the Construction and Fashion Accessory Making Program. This program focused on the fashion and creative business sector to boost employment of women while reinvigorating the traditional artisanal craft and manufacturing industry in Africa. Focusing on practical and hands-on training to equip women with the fundamental principles, techniques, and knowledge, this course enabled them to utilize the skills of constructing garments and accessories. Running over the duration of 12 weeks, 20 women successfully completed this program, and 80% of participants were immediately placed into employment. This program supports in bridging the gap between the higher education system and the workplace, providing a platform for young women from underserved communities to acquire skills to increase their employability prospects within the fashion industry. The fund are also currently supporting a program with Artisan Global, a 501c3 nonprofit that was established to develop the creative industries with local artisans and entrepreneurs in post-conflict northern Uganda. Starting with fashion programs that launched in 2014, their main focus was to build accelerated vocational programs that would lead to job opportunities and address generational cycles of poverty that were exacerbated by the effects of war. We're supporting a 9-month fashion and design course for 10 local women led by talented Ugandan designers. The program aims to equip economically marginalized women with sewing, tailoring, design, and business skills to pursue sustainable income opportunities and use fashion to ignite community change in northern Uganda. By continuing to partner and support skill-based training programs, we can help bridge the skills gap as the fashion workforce programs connect women with decent industry employment opportunities. Expanding on the report's findings, the garment industry stands out as one of the most predominantly female-driven sectors, with 70 to 90% of garment workers in developing nations identified as women. Enhancing and properly overseeing the garment sector in Africa has the potential to advance gender equality by fostering financial independence and empowerment. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Megan. So let's go for a second round of questions and dive into some of the points that you already raised in your first intervention. So starting with you again, Patrick. The UNESCO report calls for better environmental standards, norms, ethical codes, and how those standards can help identify quality criteria and support sustainable practices as alternative modes of production and consumption, including in opposition to, let's say, the excesses of global fashion. So can you tell us more what insights you have gained from your experience with the Global Fashion Exchange, and also, in collaboration with the UN Conscious Fashion and Lifestyle Network?
Thank you so much. It's a great question. For the 10 years that I've been doing Global Fashion Exchange, I've seen so much. And what we started with, like I was mentioning in the very beginning of the panel, was about the waste, the sheer amount of waste that's created from the fashion industry. And I think that's really what we focus in on. And when I first started on the journey through Global Fashion Exchange, it was I didn't really understand the capacity of that and how much waste is actually created. And so that's where I was saying we really focus in on with what we do with GFX. And so trying to, an insight would be like how we work with designers or how we work with our consultancy is how to teach designers, brands, companies, big and small corporations, about circularity and to design for circularity. And there's a lot of aspects that are needed with that. So we look at how to educate with students and what does circularity and design mean with students, how to educate with companies and brands, what does circularity look like for them, not just in the design side, but also in the business side, because I think that's something that's not really often recognized. There's the difference between circular design and circular business. And so those are some of the kind of the key things that the assets I think that we provide and that what we focus in on. And I think it's a really important conversation in Africa, of course, because they're on the receiving end of so much waste. And so it's really important for us to look at those things.
And in the context of the, I actually wasn't aware that there was even a UN conscious fashion and lifestyle network. And I worked for the UN for 20 years nearly, so...
Welcome.
Yeah. So what does this network do and how do you work with it?
Yes. Megan, who actually was just speaking as a part of the United Nations Conscious Fashion Lifestyle Network, what's amazing about it, and I'm so honored that Global Fashion Exchange is a part of it. And it's a network where they're bringing key stakeholders and actors and designers and producers and material producers and innovators from all over the world together on a platform which all has one goal, which is to do better for people and planet. So each of these companies is essentially organizations, brands, NGOs is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. Like Global Fashion is aligned with Goal 12 and Goal 13 mainly. And so what's great about that is this network, which you are invited to participate and it's vetted. And so basically what ends up happening is you go through this process with them and they look at what you're doing, they look at your company, they look at your impact targets, they look at the impact that you've made, and then you become a part of this network. And what's great about it is it's all like minds, and it's all like-minded companies, brands, NGOs, people who are wanting to come together to make a positive impact for people and planet. So that's how that works.
Great, and another great linkage to what we heard earlier about the power of fashion to drive sustainable development. But of course, none of that can happen without investment and without resources. So I'd like to follow up with you, Jesse, and you, Amar, as well, on, given you work with the Impact Fund for African Creatives and also what you told us about the work of the African Development Bank's Fashionomics, what advice do you have for partners as well as fashion creators and entrepreneurs that are looking to access investment? So maybe we start with you, Jesse, and then we can look at it from the bank's perspective as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I think that on behalf of, let's say, investors, and especially when you're looking at investors that might not be as familiar with the African continent and all of the nuances that it presents when it comes to risk management, due diligence, and all of these things, it's really important to understand, obviously, that there needs to be a bespoke approach to it where you look at it on an individual basis, but you also have to understand the brand story, right? You need to know why Ajabang is doing a collection that's looking at high life in Ghana. You need to understand what batik means to Larry J or to Jermaine Bleu and how that ties into the tradition and the culture and just the way that they view fashion through their own eyes as African designers. And it kind of does make it difficult. It makes it a little bit harder to scale as fast because at the end of the day, these aren't things that can then be duplicated in different manufacturing centers globally, right? A lot of it will, as was mentioned previously, have to be done on the continent through manufacturers who understand why these are the different ways that fabrication is being done. And so I think that when it comes to investors, it is one of those things where obviously the numbers have to make sense. I'm not saying to forget the return on investment and the IRR and all of these different things that you have to look at when you're actually investing in a brand. But I think there's just trying to look at the different levels of it and the different kind of support that will be needed or that you'll have to be giving to your designers, whether that's helping them access international markets and helping them forge partnerships with different logistics companies that can help get their stock, bringing buyers to different events, all of these different things. It's definitely something that you have to factor in rather than just looking at the numbers and seeing if the numbers make sense. I think that on the creative side, when it comes to that, and really getting access to funding in international markets, at the end of the day, numbers matter, right? Make sure that your books make sense. Make sure that you understand, I guess, how to do financial projections and all of this. Obviously, again, it is a little bit harder because, let's say in 2021, I think, in Ghana, we started the year with the CD being at a certain rate, and by the end of the year, it was almost half of that. And so if you projected to make $200,000 that year, you ended the year with about $100,000. That's really hard to explain to an investor, right? Especially one who doesn't understand that it's not realistic that you can sell all of your clothing in US dollars or in pounds or in euros. And so I think that it is something that definitely takes a lot of work and a lot of risk management to do. But again, as was mentioned on the previous panel, you can invest in manufacturing centers. Those have crazy return on investment, and they're massively in demand. It's something that's needed across the continent, right? We need people who are able to manufacture locally anything from even school uniforms, which pretty much every single school in Africa is going to require at some level, to police uniforms, to military uniforms. All of these things are things that will give you a solid return on investment, let alone then working with brands that can also be using it to manufacture their own goods for export. Think about the job creation that comes from that. Think about kind of the different levels of government investment you can tap into. You can probably even tap into the AFDB as well, or some of the Afrexim Bank money that's being made available for these things. And so I think for me, when it comes to the investment side, I think that really understanding the continent and really understanding, not even the continent, sorry, because again, it has to be, honestly, I can't even say a country by country basis, because it really has to be on an individual basis with that creative that you're looking to invest in. But I think really gaining a deeper understanding of all of the challenges that they have faced and all of the different things that they have had to overcome or to gain a deeper understanding of, or even just learn how to do to become the creative that they are, and then finding ways that you can help them grow and access different international opportunities outside of just providing them with financing. I think my last thing, and then I'll hand it over, is also just looking at alternative funding models, right? Looking at the ways in which you can make money available through grants, through equity, obviously, through debt. I'm from North America, I'm from Canada, right? We have very, very, very accessible financial institutions. I can go with whatever small amount of money might be in my bank account and get a loan. That's not something that's necessarily widely available across the African continent. You can't go to a bank, and even if you can go to a bank and they offer you financing, you have to leverage something, right? You have to put something up, and a lot of these people, they're not gonna put their family home up to potentially be able to get money to grow their clothing brand. Even if they wanted to do that, most parents would absolutely not be okay with them wanting to do that, right? And so I think just really understanding that it's not just about giving somebody money and hoping that you make money back. That's not how it works in this space. And working to understand, I guess, the various aspects and kind of the different ways in which you're gonna have to be accommodating, you're gonna have to be understanding, and you're gonna have to be supportive. And then also leverage your own connections, right? If you're based here in Paris, you can make connections with people here, with buyers, with different shops, with different stockers and retailers, that then you can use your portfolio of companies that you want to invest in, help them get access to those opportunities. And at the end of the day, if you help them make money, you also make money. So just thinking about the different ways that you can provide additional support than what traditional investment firms might consider doing, I think is kind of the best way to go about doing it.
Great, thank you, Jessie. And so Amar, does that resonate with you? And is from the AFDB perspective, some of what Jessie told us, and what advice would you have for, in particular, entrepreneurs in terms of access to investment?
Très bien.
Well, excellent. As I stated earlier, the African Development Bank is currently the prime institution in Africa. In 2022, we invested around $6.2 billion in Africa. And the active portfolio of the bank today represents around $46 billion. So you can understand that the Fashionomics initiative is one among many that is not an end in and of itself. The goal at the end of the day is to invest money somewhere. And this initiative has allowed the bank to see what is the state of health of the sector in Africa, in order to then be able to provide financing, significant financing, within the creative market and the fashion market in Africa. So it's not an end in and of itself, even though it's an important initiative. But the final goal, at the end of the day, is to provide concrete investment. And the first feedback we're getting is very positive. Now, when it comes to advice to an investor, for example, well, in my work, quite frankly speaking, I don't really think about how to convince, using words, how to convince an investor how they should invest. Each and every one of you know that an investor is a rational being who is neither good nor bad, nor is he or she against art and culture. They are a rational being that works according to an assessment of risk. And if there is risk, they will not invest. Personally, in my work, the challenge I'm confronted with on a daily basis is how to contribute to supporting African companies by offering the investor a good investment or business environment. So I'm working on public reforms and launching initiatives to develop the private sector. In the previous panel, it was mentioned how one could envisage tax support for investors, and that is the sort of thing that has to be further worked on. If there is the sufficient political will at a state level, we have a whole list of tax reforms and governance reforms that can be implemented to help investors invest in the fashion sector. And when it comes to entrepreneurs, well, this is a recurring problem in Africa, and it is as follows. The issue of how the company that is going to implement the project is structured. Very often we're confronted with a problem where there is no legal structure, and this legal structure, when it exists, is not in line with creativity, and it can't well be adapted to the textile sector. And I'll end with something that I might come back to later. About a month ago, I was in a West African country, and I visited an industrial area, an industrial production center, which is considered a good example and a pilot today. It's transforming almost all the cotton there. It's processing it on the ground there. This is a production center that is attracting foreign investment, and it's got a large textile factory. And my first question was as follows. It's great. You're producing things on the ground. You're producing T-shirts. You're producing various garments, very specific garments. But who is the team made up of, the creative team? And they said, well, we don't really have a creative team, a fashion team. We receive all orders from outside, and we just apply what we are sent. And that is the crux of the issue. We can't consider the fashion sector in Africa without the industrial circuit of producing textiles, not necessarily traditional textiles, even modern textiles. I think that African designers will have to really find their place in what exists when it comes to the industrial system and dynamics that is playing out in different African subregions in order to get out of this closed circuit of fashion as it is seen from the West.
Thank you very much for that excellent point. Thomas. Gina, you will be next. Thomas, on training and education, you've said how important that was, but we've just talked about entrepreneurship. How do these two areas work together? What are the necessary levers in this area? Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to pick up on something that Amar said before, because I really think it's very important. So the roundtable is a partnership incubator. I don't think that we could aspire to do absolutely everything. I think that the work we did recently shows it. I mean, each person should say, well, I'm an expert in financing, you're an expert in fashion, let us work together and let us bring something together to the table. And of course, we need other people as well. You've just talked about production. The French Institute for Fashion can't really work on production, really. We would need to work with someone else to tackle that. So I think that the notion of partnership truly is fundamental. And so you asked about advice. I would truly advise for different profiles to come together. So, for example, you're a bank, we are an organization. We've talked about the necessity of subsidize, so public players. Of course, we have different goals. We may have different expectations. And I think that if we are to invest just for the sake of investing, it wouldn't work if there is no education or if there's no support for entrepreneurs. Thank you very much. Thank you for that point. Gina, maybe you want to pick up on that, namely on education and training. You said it was at the heart of what you do. Absolutely. Entrepreneurship, of course, is closely linked to that. And I wanted to pick up on what Jessie said before. Of course, we expect funds, but the funders must also acknowledge and recognize the added value, and they must invest so that these firms and these companies are then structured. And I wanted to thank our donors because we work with Chanel. We've worked with Chanel since the very beginning for 19M. We also worked with LVMH and Pierre Berger and other structures. And they were able to invest in our work because they saw in the heritage of each person something that was able to drive the industry long term. And there was this aspiration to really bring structure to our work. And this is something that we do through our fellowships. Before, I was talking about cooperation. But, of course, this is something that we do through PhD students that we support in their projects, and they, of course, delve into issues that have to do with organization and structure. We've also contributed to the founding of institutions, a local institution in Casablanca, for example. The objective of this organization is to help designers, help them in their creations, of course, but also help them understand their market and help them organize and structure their entities. We did this also in Marseille with a master's that we established. It's a master's in English. It's an international master's, and it's open to everyone. Anyone can participate and see how investments work in the West in order to then go back to your country and help your company grow. And since Thomas is seated right next to me, the IFM in 2014 worked with Dominique Jacomet at the Fonds de Dotation, and these are very constructive partnerships. Thomas is right in saying that it is very important to come together. That's what makes it possible for these projects that are designed by fashion designers to truly blossom, and that's what's going to drive the industry. Thank you. Yes, thank you for putting these ideas together. Investing and then exchange, and also interregional exchange of ideas. Now, before moving on to the conclusion, I'd like to turn to the audience. I'd like to give the floor to the audience for perhaps questions that they may have. I'd like you to please be brief in asking your questions. Our colleagues will help us Oh, thank you for the lights, so that we can find the people in the room who want to ask questions. So Ms. Myrène Arzalouz, who is director of the Palais Galliera at the Fashion Museum of Paris, you have the floor.
Myrène.
Myrène? I'm right here. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking you. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to learn, really, because we are realizing just how much sometimes we are not aware of certain things. This was truly delightful as an experience, and so I'd like to thank you and thank UNESCO. Thank you for what you shared today. As I was saying, I'm here to learn and listen today, but as the director of a fashion museum in Paris, I was wondering, we've talked a lot about how transmission of heritage is important. We've talked about know-how. We've talked about intangible heritage. And what I wanted to ask was, if we look at it from the point of view of fashion in Africa, what is the role played by the heritage that is in Africa, the textile heritage, and perhaps things that could be found in museums that can be then handed down? How could this work to inspire new generations of fashion designers, and how can we work together in that pursuit? Thank you. Thank you very much, Myrène. I suggest that we take a few questions, and then I'll give you the floor to answer them. Younes Bouchida, founded with Audace Incubator, an accelerator in Rabat. You asked for the floor, Younes. Could we hand a microphone to Younes? Good afternoon. I'd like to thank UNESCO for this opportunity. Thank you. I created an incubator in Morocco, Initiative Audace. It's the very first of its kind in Morocco. We support Moroccan designers. I learned a lot today. I learned a lot about different countries in Africa, but we didn't say much about North African countries. I just wanted to say that we are here, we also need support, and we are with you in this. Thank you. Very well, we talked about the Mediterranean. We did.
On a aussi une demande de Madame Meta Stoulard, directrice.
We also have Mrs. Meta Stoulard, director in Ljubljana of a regional strategic center.
Slovenia is one of the smallest countries in the European Union. It used to be a socialist, non-allied country. But I'm managing the program of the biggest creative hub in Europe that just opened this October. We have a very strong international program, and last year we wanted to invite a creative from Ghana, and we couldn't get a visa for him. We have mobilized our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with whom we are working really strongly. We have mobilized the city of Ljubljana, our funder. We have sent all the documents that he will be paid the fee, that we will host him in our residential apartment, that we will buy his plane ticket, and still the response from the agency was that he doesn't have sufficient funds. So I don't know if you have experience with this, please help us. I couldn't believe that after 10 years, when I was first when I had the first challenges about these visas and so on, we're still talking about the visas for creatives from African continent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. A very real issue. And we also have a request from Monsieur Alain Soreille, Directeur Général de l'École.
From Mr. Alain Soriel, Director General, École du Soriel. Good afternoon. I'd like to greet Iman. We met a long time ago on Africa 2020, and a friend who is in India with the President of the Republic. And I would like to share what Iman said earlier on. I went to Gabon not long ago, and I'll go in March to develop the Fashion Week. And for Morocco, I know that there are several organizations to have a task force with young people who have succeeded with their specificities, and they can shed a new light, and they can see what the others are doing in other regions. I was interviewed in Gabon on TV, and I was asked a question, what do you think about African fashion? And I didn't want to speak about African fashion. I wanted to speak about fashion, full stop. When I watched Iman's fashion show, I just wanted to speak about fashion. When Karl Lagerfeld had his fashion show, they didn't say, well, this is a German fashion. They said it's fashion, full stop. So for know-how, traditional know-how, no. Know-how, full stop. We don't need traditional know-how at École du Perret. We work with those who want to work with us. We have this expertise, contemporary expertise. When you look at the patterns, and they are contemporary. After that, you have the know-how, which is universal. When I meet young people, I will say that they're eager to do things, and globalization brings people together. At the same time, the youth are looking for their own identity, so we should not disappoint them if we do not work in a sustainable manner when we work in their countries. Thank you.
Malheureusement, le temps tourne, comme on me le rappelle, donc.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and we'll have to stop here for the discussions with the room. Thank you for your very interesting comments. So we will give a last opportunity to the panelists to react or to conclude, more particularly about partnerships, incubators. This is really the theme of our discussion. What can we do better together? How can we be better connected? And if you have some advice for UNESCO, what UNESCO can do more to promote these exchanges. So maybe we will start with Gina. Well, I heard the questions, and we can look at the know-how and what the donors are doing, and what is being done at the international level as entrepreneurship also, because IFM, for instance, is working on the know-how aspect, but maybe we can go further and consider know-how as a value added across borders. It's an asset. Of course, you have the craft, which can be consolidated with the proper information with transmission. They can be used as an asset and take them further. And I think that UNESCO's work is important because it helps to spread those ideas. Of course, we have borders, and I agree, fashion is universal. It's about garments, but we do have some subtle cultural aspects depending on countries, and we can really build on those differences, and with our unique experience, we can actually work on the long term and develop things further. Of course, we are also faced with the visa issues because our winners come from 21 countries, and when we have an event in Marseille, let's say that it becomes complicated to get all the visas and so on. It takes time to work on that aspect. It takes also goodwill. Thank you very much to Giulia Luciani, Maison de la Mode. Patrick.
Your reactions also to what you've heard from the audience or from other fellow panelists?
Wrapping it up. Wrap it up. I'm really simple. I'm going to echo what an earlier panelist, Omoyemi, said, and I think that it's super important that we don't keep talking and we need to act now. I think it's really important we need to invest in the people, we need to invest in infrastructure, we need to invest in systems, we need to invest in Africa, and I think that it's all right there. And I don't really see any reason why we don't. So I'm going to echo Omoyemi on that, and that will be my concluding thought is that we should do that. That's what it is.
Let's get moving.
Let's get moving.
Okay, great. Thank you, Patrick Duffy, founder of Global Fashion Exchange. Thank you so much. Amar, vos réflexions.
Oui, très rapidement.
What are your thoughts? Well, quickly, I would say that financing fashion in Africa is an essential issue moving forward. There are two messages that I would like to convey to the creatives in Africa. First, advocacy with women and political leaders to raise their awareness on the need to improve the business environment. As I said, there are several technical instruments which can be used to facilitate the business environment and also include fashion and creation in national development strategies. As a development banker, when I go to a country, the first thing I look into is the national development strategy. If fashion and creation is not included, it's very difficult for me to persuade the members of the board of directors to fund Mr. Al-Fadi or another designer. We also have to boost the fabric textile industry in Africa because unfortunately, we don't see our designers leading a plant in order to boost creation. And that's the only way fashion and design in Africa can have a real market at the national and international level. Thank you, Amar Kesab of the ADB. Thank you.
Should we hear from you? Thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really quickly, rather than shamelessly plugging myself, I just wanted to address two of the questions that were brought up in this room because I think they're so important. Firstly, the visa issue is a massive issue, and I don't know how, I guess you said recommendations for UNESCO. I don't know if that's something you guys can look at. I'm not a policy person. I'm not a embassy person. I don't understand the complexities of it. But part of accessing opportunities, part of accessing global audiences is being able to physically go to different spaces. And that is not possible if you cannot access visas, right? And my other point is, and I believe that it was the gentleman who asked the question last, but for all of you in the audience, you guys can be consumers of these things, right? E-commerce exists, online stores exist. I think when a lot of people think of fashion in Africa, instantly it's the beautiful prints behind me that come to their head. But there are people like Iman, there are people like Vic Nate in Nigeria who create some of the most stunning gowns I've ever seen that anyone could wear on any red carpet, to any wedding, to any event. It's not just bold patterns and bold prints, it's the quality of craftsmanship and the workmanship that goes into it that really, truly for me is what African fashion is about. And I think that obviously, please check out IFAC. I think we do great work personally, but I think just to wrap it up, I think that understanding that there's so many different types of African fashion and so many different ways in which you can tap into this industry, even just for people in this room, people tuning on the live stream, and in general, and finding how you can support different creatives from the continent is really, at the end of the day, why we're all here and why we're all working in different means, different matters, to kind of collaborate to really boost investment, boost visibility, and boost access to African creatives.
Thank you, Jessie. So now we all know what to wear on our next red carpet walk, which happens all the time. Jessie Reynolds from the Impact Fund for African Creatives Enterprises, thank you so much for being with us. Thomas, le mot de la fin?
Thomas, your last concluding words. Of course, I'd love to answer the questions that were asked in the room. There's so many things to say. Maybe to answer the head of Duperret, we're in a bit of a similar situation. People contact us, and of course we'd like to be able to work together. We need collaboration to be able to have an effect. We wouldn't be as credible if we worked alone. I mentioned collaboration with the University of Dakar and a team of West African and Senegalese researchers, and the EFM is the director of the chair there with Chanel. It wouldn't have been okay or effective for them to work alone, but in cooperation and collaboration, it worked well. So when it comes to know-how and the question asked on that, this is a very sensitive and important topic, and it's not something that we can do alone, and we have to work in collaboration. And also another thing, maybe a bit more of a personal answer or remark when it comes to highlighting creatives. Of course, we're beyond that now. Of course, they have to be highlighted and compensated well, but this is not enough unless there's sales, unless there's distributors. It won't work. So I think the stage of pushing people forward and highlighting them, this isn't sufficient right now. And in the same way that there are banks, I think at the end of the day, there have to be organizations that are not necessarily driven by a return on investment. Incubator was, for example, created thanks to DEFI, which is a structure that raises taxes among companies and then provides this revenue to organizations such as ours and to young creatives so that they can launch their collections or create showrooms and so on. So collectively, thanks to these kind of federating initiatives, we should be able to see these sort of structures created. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you, Thomas Delattre, for highlighting the importance of these connections. This brings us to the end of this panel and almost to the end of this event. I'd like to thank our panelists. Please give them a nice warm round of applause. And I'd like to invite our panelists to take their seats. And Toussaint, I'll give you back the floor. Thank you very much, Julien. Thank you to all the participants of this panel and to members of the public for the different interventions. This event is reaching its end, and it is an honor for me to invite Ernesto Ottone, the Assistant Director General of the Culture Sector of UNESCO, to address us his concluding remarks. Thank you very much, Toussaint. I'm trying to be brief. I know you must all be quite tired, so I won't take up too much of your time. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, partners, and especially friends. As you've understood, I'm sure, it's a great honor to be able to take the floor in the name of UNESCO today at the end of this first edition of the UNESCO Partnership Incubator on the fashion sector in Africa. We've had the opportunity to share this moment of reflection, dialogue, and exchanges with eminent panelists who are fashion designers, entrepreneurs, and key partners of UNESCO from the public and private sector. And we've been able to spend the day with them. And I wanted to, first of all, thank each one of you for trusting UNESCO and participating in this conference. You generously shared your different points of views, your perspectives, your personal stories as well. Because in culture, we're based on memory, identity, and our stories. And your advice on how we can strengthen our synergies and make the most of the opportunities of the growth that was presented in the recent UNESCO report in order to create a resilient and sustainable fashion sector in Africa. This work in the fashion sector is part of a greater initiative pertaining to the cultural and creative industries in Africa, work that was already launched of a report in 2021, a report on the African film industry, and which will continue this year with the publication of a report on the publishing and book industry in Africa. It is also based on two key priorities. First of all, we have the priority Africa, which is a global general priority. And then there's the follow-up on the Mondial 2022 declaration. This took place in Mexico and was signed by all the different culture ministers. And it shows a clear commitment that is turned for the future in order to make the most of the power of culture for sustainable development. As we've seen today, the fashion sector is no exception and offers opportunities, strategic opportunities for sustainable growth, employment, and the empowerment of women and the diversification of African economies. Fashion is at the crossroads of various talents, traditions, and inspirations. This makes the sector very innovative and allows local preferences or regional preferences to coexist with the global aesthetic. It is rooted in textile traditions, in local art, and it revitalizes the historical crafts of Africa by highlighting its precious heritage. Some of the creators presented 54 different countries represent 54 different histories and countries and cultures, but each one of these countries has particular identity in each and every one of those countries. And we mustn't forget that. We sometimes visualize Africa as a single continent, which undoubtedly it is, and we do consider it a global priority, but there are individualities and there are markets that are different. So you can't just copy-paste. You need to identify for each sector in each industry in each of the countries, you need to identify systems that can work in the existing environment. Some of the creators that were present here today were pioneers of this movement. This singular character of fashion as part of the expression of cultural expressions and of intangible world heritage is a very important element. As we've seen, the fashion sector in Africa has seen significant development these last years thanks to the growing demand. The demand appreciates the originality of the designs and the quality of the designs and of African crafts. As the report has highlighted, the growth of electronic business or trade has risen from 13% in 2017 to 28% in 2021, which clearly shows that there's a growth of digitalization.
Entendu plusieurs fois parler
Many times we talked about Made in Africa, and we've heard it many times. I recall the discussions we had about this report and the impact it could have, and the incubator. Of course, it's not about the report transforming anything in of itself, but it's about opening up roads and ways to change. And I remember that we would say make in Africa rather than made in Africa, because it's a different concept. It truly is a way of doing things that is different. And I believe that throughout the process and throughout the interviews that we led, for the report, we realized that there was truly a desire to use specific materials, and that there's also a way of doing things that is very specific to the African continent. And I think that it's important to preserve that. And at UNESCO, we hold both dearly, the Made in Africa and the Make in Africa. So I think this is truly a very exciting time for this industry. I think that we should all contribute to it. UNESCO will stand at your side in pursuit of that goal. Now, we also talked about intellectual property rights and the insufficient protection in Africa. It's also the case in other continents. It's the case in Latin America, in South Asia, or in the Caribbean. Sometimes there's a lack of policies that could support designers. There's lack of access to the market, lack of protection in terms of intellectual property, but also issues with education and training in the area of fashion. All these issues also point to another fact. This is a possibility to build something. And this is why this incubator, for us, was a way to expose what hinders designers today in Africa, what makes it difficult for them to make it their primary occupation. By launching this call to support the industry in Africa, we want to unlock the potential of the industry to contribute to sustainable development. The industry is closely linked with the natural environment, with beliefs, practices, intangible heritage, but it is also closely linked with the well-being of each individual and each community. As we celebrate African fashion, its wealth, its creativity, we must also commit to supporting an industry that's fair and sustainable. And this, of course, involves the community, designers, and consumers. By guaranteeing a fair compensation, a quality training and education, environmental sustainability, that we will be able to create the conducive conditions for a creative industry in Africa. And by way of conclusion, I'd like to, and I'll end here, I'd like to thank all of the panelists who participated in these discussions today. Of course, let us keep in touch. I heard you loud and clear. Let us go beyond words, and together, let us act now. Thank you on behalf of UNESCO.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ADG Culture. Thank you for your closing remarks. We have now reached the end of this event, but it is the starting point for new reflections, new paths for collaboration to support this industry that is full of opportunities for the continent. I wanted to give a warm word of thanks to my team. My team worked relentlessly for this event to take place. I'd like to thank them for their excellent work. I also wanted to thank our colleagues from the technical staff. The speaker is kind enough to thank the interpreters. The interpreters thank him and you as well. Thank you all for your participation.
Pour ceux et celles qui le souhaitent,
for those of you who are interested, please meet us at the restaurant that's at the 7th floor. We can continue these discussions and enjoy a nice drink. And of course, you are all invited to the cocktail. We've also set up a photo booth with our partner, the IRC magazine. Please don't hesitate. Go ahead and take beautiful photos there. And now I'd like to ask our panelists to come up on stage. We're going to take a group photo. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for your participation. Enjoy your evening and enjoy your weekend. Thank you very much.
ngaina makambo ngaina makambo uru para kileba juli balutua lutua lutua uru wengi para kile munu badu tua 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 songi songi banikoe likambo na motema ngai na motema unu para kileba chililo lutua ona makambo monongelet tewat nasimakot iyot onina wanika mompuli mwa mutandenot ukunabe pepena wat dutu nyimba mulemat ebukimba mabot ilena boy mona wabongo jitao amunja mit inyandolo un weapon ba